Hi everyone. So guys, we're on to the final keynote speech stroke, interview stroke, discussion stroke, bit of crack for the next hour with somebody we're really excited to have in town. Somebody who we've been pushing, pulling, lobbying, threatening to come to Ireland for the last 3 years nearly. But just to introduce, before I introduce Paddy, I just want to tell a very quick story that I think is quite relevant and poignant given where we are. 100 years ago this month, a document was being prepared in this city. Within 1 mile of this building, there was a document being written, a document with the ultimate purpose. The theme of this week is building a culture with purpose. The purpose of this document, in my mind, was the ultimate purpose. It was about the freedom and responsibility of a nation, the freedom and responsibility of this country. The Proclamation of Independence was written within this month, 100 years ago. At the heart of this document, it was about opportunity for all its people. It was about equality, and it was about autonomy. A lot in this document was mirrored, in fact, in the Declaration of Independence in the United States. And we know a lot about the core values of the US around freedom, around pursuit of happiness. And in my mind, there's a lot within these documents that are truly transformative. That document, as it goes, and that purpose came to life in this room 3 years later when the first Irish Parliament sat in this very room. So it's an interesting concept to have a beacon with a very clear purpose to ultimately create something that's defined around cultural identity. Patty McCord, who many of you know, and those of you who don't know, was the co-author of the Freedom and Responsibility document in Netflix. She was the ex-chief talent officer in Netflix. And just to give you a bit more colour in terms of what she's done beyond Netflix, we were setting up this week and we built the National Employment Week website on GitHub. You all know GitHub. We marketed the event through HubSpot. We ticketed the event through Eventbrite. And then this week, a lot of tweets going out. I saw Brian Cody was trending earlier on. And we have a number of Prezi presentations. All of those companies Patty has consulted with and worked with and has shaped and worked in driving the culture. And a lesser known story, we were in Galway 2 nights ago and Patty she experienced The West Was Awake and it was a good crack in Galway. Went back to the G Hotel and I said, look, we're interested in Patty's a lady, great crack. And I said, look, I'll just take 10 minutes out and just kind of de-Netflix myself. Sat down in the hotel room, picked up the remote control, Netflix button on the remote control, you know. So it's omnipresent, to use a word that David mentioned earlier on. So I'd like to introduce our keynote this evening, Paddy McCord.
When he introduces me like that, I kind of want you all to sing the Irish national anthem. And then I could get kind of weepy and... Are we sitting?
We're in for it, aren't we? We're in for it. Take a seat there, Paddy, yeah.
What they said.
Say it again?
What they said.
What, who said?
The last panel was so great, wasn't it? That was really great.
They're great.
I'm pretty far away from
Paddy,
you.
let's do a quick fire round.
Let's do it.
Let's do it, okay. Ireland in 3 words.
Ooh. Rainy. Warm people. Did I use up all my words?
20 words, go.
Exciting. I mean, it feels like I'm home with similar companies, similar challenges. It's great to be in a place where things are going well and you're excited about the future. It's wonderful.
A lot of companies you've worked with.
A lot of companies I've worked with. It's sort of like, I know you. I know your counterpart in Sunnyvale. Hi.
Next question, your most admired business leader?
My current admired business leader is Sheryl Sandberg. She's been through a lot personally, and I think she's done that really well. And I think she's sort of undervalued at Facebook. Mark Zuckerberg gets sort of all the glory, and I think Sheryl's one of the people that does a lot of the work. And the work that she did with Lean In is just really profoundly impactful, I think, to this generation of feminists. So rock on, Sheryl.
Most overhyped company?
Right now, my current overhyped company is Snapchat, but I spend a lot of time with companies who are the Netflix of, right? Subscription snacks, subscription dog food, whatever those things are. And who knows? And the thing is, I don't want to be cynical about that stuff, because when we started Netflix, my friends were like, yeah, that sounds really stupid.
You invented it. Be careful what you wish for, Paddy.
I know.
Well, look, that brings us on to Netflix. So let's go for it. So 2 o'clock in the morning, Reed Hastings, CEO of Netflix, called you. What did he say?
Okay, a little background before I do the 2 o'clock in the morning call. Reed and I worked at another company before Netflix. It was a software tools company. Reed wrote the first product for the company. So let me just say that underneath that polished professional CEO that you see on TV is a complete nerd, right? This is a geek. So it's 2 o'clock in the morning. He's like, hi, are you sleeping? I'm like, of course, geek, I'm normal. It's 2 o'clock in the morning. And we had sold the company before, and Reed made a pile of money, and he had started angel investing in a bunch of companies. And he said, hey, by the way, I'm going to go and join Mark, who's the co-founder of Netflix, and run the company. And I said, okay, sounds like a good career move. Can I go back to sleep now? Why are you telling me this at 2 in the morning? And he said, because I want you to come too. And I said, no, I'm not going to do that. First of all, I already know what you're asking me to do because I already did a startup with you. So why don't you call somebody that doesn't know what you're talking about? Two, seriously, DVDs in the mail. You guys may not know about this, but that was the original idea for Netflix in the US. I'm like, that's just the dumbest idea I ever heard of. And three, what it is that you want me to do. And he said, I want you to be my VP of HR. I said, for God's sake, Reed, there's 30 people. You don't need me. I'm going back to bed. He's like, wait, let's make the company we always dreamed of. Okay, for those of you who are HR people in the room, is that music to your ears? And I said, well, if we did that, how would you now? A, I'm awake. B, if we did that, how would you know? And he said, oh, I'd walk in the door every day, and I would love solving these problems with these people. And I'm like, yeah, that's good. It's hard to top. Because what would you say? And I said, wouldn't it be great if we were a great company to be from? If you saw Netflix on your resume, you'd be like, wow, you're at Netflix? And I just saw him a couple weeks ago. We went to Sundance together, and every time I see him, I'm like, we both got our wish. We both got our wish.
So to create a company to be from,
yeah,
quite powerful. Did you achieve it?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I spend, because I have time now, which I didn't have when I was sort of heads down for 14 years at Netflix, I spend a lot of time with alum. And, it's like, I don't want to use the family metaphor because I don't believe in that with work, but I'm so proud of the things that people have achieved that have worked for us. I mean, sprinkled out into the world, all these little seeds of the culture and the leadership and the ideas that people have, yeah.
I asked you during the week, we were chatting, did you ever consider going back into the corporate world after Netflix? And you commented that lightning doesn't strike twice.
Yeah.
What did you mean by that, Paddy?
Oh, I think I had, so I'm kind of I started out in big companies, and then I ended up in the startup world, and that's where I knew I had died and gone to heaven. And so I realized that I was a bit of a serial entrepreneur. And I used to tell Reed that I time out at 4 years. It's like about on the 5th year of a company, I'm like, yeah, I kind of figured it out. This is kind of boring, I'm going to move on. And the thing about Netflix, I was there 14 years, was I actually had 3 tours of duty at Netflix. The first one was, could we come up with a business model before we went broke? That took about 4 years. The second one was our DVD by mail in the US business. That took another 4 or 5 years. And the third business was our streaming business, which you all are aware of now. And right now, Netflix is involved in global streaming and original content, which is yet another business. So I got lucky because I got, 3 different businesses in one company. And I think that'd be really hard to duplicate.
Let's talk about the document, Paddy. So I'm sure a lot of you have read it, if not all of you.
Who has? I want to show of hands. Who's read Netflix Culture Deck? Okay, that's helpful.
Yeah, okay. So just to explain it, do you want to explain the genesis of it maybe and give us a sense of how it evolved?
So, I just told you that we wanted to create this great company, and we realized that culture and greatness and the things about how we work together are only achieved if you pay attention to it. And I know that sounds really straightforward and logical, but you know how it is when you get busy with all the other stuff that's happening in your business. You're like, shit, we ought to get to that culture thing, Sigmar. Robert says every time I swear I have to say Sigmar.
So then she said to me, okay, when I say it, I'm going to say fucking Sigmar.
Fucking Sigmar. Am I done, right? Okay, where was I? So we decided to write stuff down. And the first thing we wrote down, what Reed said to me, let's write down our values. Let's have an offsite and do a values exercise. I'm like, I'm not doing that. No, I'm not. If you want me to create a poster or t-shirts, we'll just create some cool thing to put on t-shirts. But I will write down behaviors. So instead of writing down esoteric, aspirational things we wanted to be in, right at this time, remember, we started Netflix in 1998. It was during the collapse of Enron. I'm like, you ever seen their values, boss? You know, they're like carved in stone, and they clearly didn't follow them. So we wrote down the things we value in each other. One of the first things we wrote down was intelligence. Because I said to Reed, I'm like, how about if we just don't hire any stupid people? He goes, can we write that down? I'm like, we can just do it, can't we? And he goes, well, why would we say something like that? I'm like, you're totally intolerant. Let's just be real, and let's just not hire some people that don't challenge us, right? So for those of you who have read the Netflix culture deck, that's the first section of it. And we rewrote that section 6 times during the 14 years I was there. So what we did was we'd write something down and we'd talk through it with our organization, and we would say, okay, are we true to those things? And let's use those behaviors. You know, probably once a month at our executive team, we would pick one of those behaviors, courage, and say, okay, everybody come to the meeting with an example of somebody on your team who's demonstrated that. And then, of course, it would be, well, how about these 3 people on your team who didn't? What are we going to do about that? Right? So we wrote that. We had a tough time in the company. Most people don't know this either. We were going to go public in the year 2000. And the dot-com bubble burst in the Silicon Valley. That was when our DVD by mail customers were really only in we'd like to say it was US-wide. And then all of a sudden our customers were all out of work. And the economy went to hell, and the bankers pulled the IPO, and we didn't know if we were going to make it. So I laid off 1/3 of the company. It was a small company, but 30%, that's a lot. And we decided that we weren't going to be Yahoo for movies, and we weren't going to be everything to everybody. So I had to get rid of the great team of people who wrote personal movie reviews. These guys were from like Variety and People magazine. They were so fun. I love those guys still. But we realized that, well, customers could write reviews and that was free. So we'll let them do that. So we got rid of anybody who wasn't technically very qualified, anybody who wasn't working directly on DVD by mail, and anybody who slipped in who was a baby or a whiner. Because I couldn't listen to that guy complain about the color of his t-shirt anymore, because he would not believe me when I said, you don't understand. We don't have money for t-shirts. And actually, I think that time for us was a really important time for Netflix that some of you have yet to experience, which is poverty drives really important decisions. It drives you to focus. So that Christmas in 2001, in 2000, DVD players dropped to $99. And everybody in America got one for Christmas, and inside of every box was a coupon that said, try Netflix for free. And our business went, but we couldn't hire more people because our business was going up. For every new customer, we had to buy 3 DVDs at $20 a piece, and the stamps and the envelopes and the labor to put them in. So we were doing twice as much work with 1/3 as many people, and it was more fun. I mean, it was so exciting. It was palpable. I mean, people were just, and I also had gotten rid of all the middle managers. So I said to Reed as we were carpooling one day, I'm like, how fun is this? I mean, this should be really hard. He goes, I know, go figure it out. And I realized that it was because we were very clear about what we needed to do, an incredible clarity. Everybody shared every bit of information and numbers that we had on our growing trends of our business. We had every single person was in the right job for what we were trying to do now. And the alternative to success was death. I mean, really, if we either made it or it was over. And people were so engaged because everybody mattered. There was no fluff anywhere. And so that's when I wrote we wrote together the chapter called High Performance, for those of you who've seen the deck. And after we did that, we said, high performance people are engaged, all the things I just told you. And then we got lucky and we went public. And then I looked around the company and went, shit. It's not the right set of people, because now we're a public company, right? So I had whole departments full of hardworking, sincere, fabulous early-stage startup people. And those of you who've been in an early-stage startup, here's how you solve problems. You work really hard. How do you solve this problem? You just pound at it. How do you figure out what the right answer is? You do the wrong answer 142 times. Right? Whiteboards are filled with lists of not that, not that, not that, not that. And then if you have a chance for real success and you're in the right time and you have enough money, your problems instantly change from problems of difficulty to problems of complexity and scale. And when I looked around the team, I was like, oh man, this part of the business is going to grow 100 times next year. And I got a team of people that I know can imagine 10 times, but you really can't imagine 100x unless you've seen 50.
Yeah.
And so we had to then work on what was high performance, right? I had to work with each part of the business and say, knowing what we need to do in the next couple of years, would you have this team that you have now? And then there was a very large temptation to go, well, you're really good, but I really need somebody who's twice as good or twice as experienced. But I tell you what, I'll give you half the job and I'll give you half the job. There. Then you can stay and we get the whole job done. But you actually don't know what you're doing, so now I have to have a supervisor who tells you what to do. The supervisor doesn't actually do anything except tell you what to do. And since the supervisor's job is to tell you what to do, they have to have a manager. And the manager sets direction for the supervisor to tell the person what to do. And then the manager is only setting direction, doesn't really set direction, so I have to have a director to have and all of a sudden it occurred to me, that's how org charts look like those big fat pyramids. What if I just said, I love you, Bunky, and then hire the right person? So that...
Bunky's Reed Hastings, right?
Bunky is whoever you're my Bunky right now, Robert.
Delighted.
So you can be a Bunky.
Delighted.
So that was so then that part, like getting real high performance people on the team, that took a couple of years.
Yeah.
Right? And then after that, we're like, okay, if we have high performing people on the team who are fully formed adults for whom judgment is the most important thing to do, and then we're big enough that we're getting a lot of pressure as a public company to start doing rules and process. We need an expense report process, we need a travel reporting process, and we need a vacation policy. So some of you might have heard about that. And then I stopped and went, why? Why? They don't clock in and out. And I really only care about what they deliver. Why do I need a vacation policy? Oh my God, the lawyers went ballistic. KPMG came down, they had audited us. They're like, you guys are insane. We use the firm Wilson Sonsini. It's a big law firm in the Silicon Valley. And Larry Sonsini got on the phone with Reed and I. He said, I want you to know that I personally forbid you to do this. And we said, thank you very much for your counsel, Larry. And we did it anyway. Here's why. I started to calculate, okay, what's the issue? What are people afraid of? They're afraid, there's no law that's in California that says you have to have time off for salaried employees. So first I did my homework, right? And then I knew that the lawyers, God bless them, were going to be concerned that we'd be sued because we would apply the policy indiscriminately. Somebody would get more vacation than somebody else. Okay, for those of you who work at companies, which I assume is all of you, don't some people take more time off than others? Anyway, We call them exceptions. So rather than policing exceptions, I decided that if I just focused on what people got done, I really didn't care. So, and who has a no time off policy? Who's adopted something like that? You know what it turned out to be? You know what kind of time off people take? Same as they used to. People with kids in school take school holidays and a couple weeks in the summer and something in the winter. And young, single people, they save it all up and they hike Nepal. I'm a big fan of the 3-day week. I mean, the 3-day weekends, because I pretend I work full time. But what the difference was that people felt this huge power just by being in control of that, right? And then I started realizing that in order to manage that well, I had to help my managers be clear about what they were trying to do, what their time frames were. So rather than having my managers spend their time, coaching and developing everyone for success all of the time, they needed to spend their time saying, here's our time frame. And then Robert goes, yeah, but I wanted to hike Nepal. And you're like, well, we need to deliver this in April, so could you go in May? Let me check the weather, right? It's like I always love things around maternity leave. That's I love that leave. It's the leave you have 9 months to plan, right? So what I'm telling you is, so then we'd try something, and when I rolled out the no vacation plan, I didn't say, this is it, we've made up our minds, I've been touched, and I know this to be true, my vision. I said, if it doesn't work out, we'll go back to doing what everybody else does. There's always that option, best practices.
Don't start her on best practices. You're only empowering her. I like the way you come back after your rants to answer the question. Thanks. I'm only kidding.
That was the lightning round, wasn't it?
That wasn't very lightning.
Okay, no.
Yeah, I'm only joking. Thank you. The document, so just listening to Brian Cole earlier on, we were talking about Brian when he was speaking, I talked about that spirit. Mm-hmm. In my mind, this document captured the spirit and the personality of Netflix.
Yeah.
With that in mind, what role did this document play when you went through all of that change? Do you think it was an integral part to the success of the business?
Yes, I do. But first of all, heart Brian. I might take up hurling just to be around him.
Kilkenny will be thrilled to have you, I'm sure.
He's a great guy. Yeah, I do. I think that first of all, the other thing is I didn't write it, and the management team didn't write it. We always, whenever we would roll out a new part of it, we rolled it out with the rest of the company. And employees would come to me and they're like, I don't like what you guys said. Like at one point in the compensation piece, I encouraged people to interview. It's like, you want to know what you're worth, go interview. So one of my managers came in, she goes, I don't think we're going to get anything done now that you and Reed told everybody they have to interview. I'm like, oh, for God's sake, it's a PowerPoint presentation. It's not an order from God. And by the way, I walked through the building and people seem to be working. Are you disagreeing with the concept or are you disagreeing with how it's written? She's like, well, I just don't like how it's written. I'm like, send me a rewrite. I'll update it. It's not that hard, right? So people were involved in it. And more importantly, and I think what the panel right before us just said, you guys said so much great stuff. You can see people doing it. I love the examples of a great culture is when it's manifested in what people do every day. So absolutely it got us through tough times. But the other thing that got us through a lot of tough times was that was part of the culture, was the complete transparency about what was happening in the business and our assumption that the fully formed adults who are really smart were really interested in the business. We used to have a meeting every Friday, too. We talked about the Friday meeting. We called it the metrics meeting. And we'd all go out in our parking lot and we'd pass around a piece of paper. And the paper was basically the executive dashboard, right? How much money you had in the bank, how much revenue there was, what our cost of goods were, just basically the operations of the business, the basic P&L and whatever was on our minds, customer sat. And we go around the table and we talk about, just stand out in the parking lot and talk about it and collectively go, how about it, have we ever tried this? And somebody would be like, no, that's a good thing, let's try that, right? We learned later that from the ex-head of Blockbuster, that they used to send spies to hide in the bushes on Friday for our metrics meeting. Isn't that great?
Super.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. The ultimate compliment, I think. You mentioned culture.
Yeah.
You've previously described your role in Netflix as being the Chief Operations Officer of Culture and the Product Manager of People.
People, yeah.
What did you mean by that, Patty?
I meant by that was it was my job to make sure, for example, that we had a very, very disciplined, very, very effective recruiting team, for example. And what I mean by discipline was, you and I have talked about this because we do the same thing in that way, that we had a constant sense of what the available talent was for the company now and for the future, and that the identification of that talent was not the job of HR, that was the job of everybody in the company, particularly in management. And so I say, you know, management's job is to build a great team that builds high quality stuff on time. That's pretty much it, right? But you have to put together the team. And so we did a lot of work around making sure that pipeline was full, making sure that we knew what the next generation of talent was, making sure that we were partnering with the hiring managers, not delivering to. Partnering, not delivering to. So whenever I got a new manager who goes, well, I can't, you know, I'm going to have to tell Reed I can't get this stuff done because HR isn't giving me enough candidates. I'm like, wow, you're going to be in trouble. Because he goes, yeah, because I heard you gave my recruiter to somebody else. I'm like, right, because you don't return her calls, because you don't respond to emails, because you don't look at resumes. So clearly you have another methodology for building a great team, which is what we're paying you to do, by the way. It's not her job to run whatever it is we hired you to do. It's your job. So that was my job, to build that. My other job was to build a culture of people who would call each other on great behavior or not great behavior. To be able to say in a meeting, wow, you know, we're almost done making this decision and you've been complaining about what a stupid idea you thought it was for the last 3 months. So did we change your mind or what? And then you to say, actually, no, I disagree, and for us to have a nice argument about that, and to walk away and you live, right? That's what culture really is.
During the same panel discussion earlier that Brian was on, Bob Maru from Boston College mentioned about trying to get people to work on, I think it was to mirror some part of the Middle East from Sunday, so outside of office hours. And again, he was saying, look, he does it and he wants people to buy into that purpose. How important is it from a leader, whether it be a HR leadership perspective or a business leader perspective, or the same thing, which they probably are, to practice what they preach?
It's everything. And the other thing I heard on the panel here that just warmed my heart, one of the things I think that people who are in internal functions in companies do is they refer to other people in the company as their customers. That's my internal customer. I'm a service organization. I used to tell my HR team, you know, we're a service organization. It's not spelled SERVANTS. Just FYI. So when they start treating you like that, just walk away. Just walk away. Walk away. The customer doesn't work in your company typically, right? The customer is someone you serve with delight. And one of the beautiful things about Netflix, it's not true for everybody here, but kind of is, we're our own customer. So everybody had a legitimate reason to comment on the product or service. Like when I remember when I first signed up my dad, he kept, endlessly clicking on stuff. I'm like, Dad, we just did it. We signed. It's like, it says click here. It says click here. So I'm doing a bug report while my dad's doing it, right? My dad's getting an email to sign up for the service. The service should know he's already signed up, right? So we could all collectively do, but we all could keep each other real by saying, okay, and you want to have a 16-person sign-off for this particular thing. How does that make a customer happy? Because 16 sign-offs is going to take, 7 days?
Yeah.
And aren't we delivering something to the customer that would make them happy, like right now?
Darrow spoke a lot about that from Intercom as well.
Yes, exactly,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So, that, and the idea that, and here's another HR word I hate empowerment. I hate it. You're empowered. There, you better. Like we have these little wands or something. I always wanted a wand. People have power. They walk in the door with power. We have to empower them because we took it away. So let's forget that shit. Sigmar.
The best money we ever spent.
Let's just so and the other thing that Brian said today that I loved was, if you expect mediocrity from people, that's exactly what you're going to get. If you expect amazing, you'll be surprised. I mean, I loved how he talked about constantly, you can do better, you can do more, you can do better, you can do more. And I think if you remove obstacles so that people can do that, they'll do it, right? Everybody loves that feeling.
Yeah. You mentioned your dad. I'll tell you a quick story just before we segue into the world and the future world of talent. He heard you on George Hook on Monday. I don't know if many of you heard Paddy went into it in George Hook. And he texted me, he goes, very sweet, he goes, oh, I know you're going to the airport to pick up a lady on Sunday in the airport, And he goes, oh, I heard on the radio, I think it was Patty. I said, yeah. And he goes, yeah, because she's doing amazing work. So you have a new fan of my dad. But then he said to me, he goes, I thought it was just Dyson who were really that edgy. He goes, what do you mean? He goes, Neil Fisk are doing amazing things. I said, I know, it's Netflix. So you're building them by the minute.
Yeah, George was challenging.
He sure is. So just moving on to the future world of work. Okay, let's touch on a couple of things that the panel spoke about throughout the day, right?
Yeah.
And I know you love Brian. We also said Paddy's writing a book. We're trying to get a chapter on Ireland in Paddy's book. And I think after today, there might be some mention, I hope. But Michelle had a great idea. She goes, Rob, get her arrested. We'll definitely feature in the book, The day's young yet. So the first panel discussion this morning was about diversity.
Yeah.
Parity.
Yeah.
What are your views?
Is it now time for my call to action on pay equality?
Absolutely.
Well, first of all, I had this aha the other day that really pissed me off. What are the three most female-dominated departments in our companies? Marketing, finance, and HR. Could we please fix pay inequality? If we don't own this, who the hell does? Okay? So it's easy. You go back and you make a list of all the titles in your organization. You can take one team or another, just figure it out. Put the average male salary, the average female salary. If there's a discrepancy, true it up, write a check, done. Just fix it. Then go back and find out how you got there. Then go find out about inherent bias. Then go talk about how we need to interview people. Fix all those things, but first, just fix it. So I ran diversity programs at Sun Microsystems in 1989 and 90. And when Sheryl Sanders' book came out with the data about how we were doing, it was worse. Okay? Because I think what we did in the 90s was we all had diversity programs and we had coaches, and I did a speaking circuit like this with the head of diversity at Apple and the head of diversity at HP, and we talked and we talked and we talked and we talked. We talked and we talked. So now it's time for action, people. Okay? So it's dollars and cents to start with. It's filling the pipeline with a diverse pool of candidates. It's insisting that your recruiters do that too. Go into your company, take a pad of paper, and so I tell people, yellow legal pad. Who's the best woman you've ever worked with? Who's the best woman you've ever worked with? Who's the best woman you've ever worked? Interview them all, you will hire somebody. It takes work, right? So now's the time for us to get to work. Second thing, if you're a woman or you're in a company that hires women, which I'm assuming is all of us, and you bring someone into your corporation who's paid less than what they're worth in the open market, say you come in at 20% below what you're worth. With our compensation systems, Let's say you have a performance review program that's attached to your compensation system with a 6.5% merit increase budget and a bell curve distribution across your salary ranges that you do once a year. And you're amazing. What are you going to get? If you're amazing, you get 15%, twice as much as everybody else. You're behind by 5. You'll never catch up. So if we don't true it up, we're just going to keep doing it forever and ever. 2 men I told this to had these 2 reactions. One man said, I'm a vice president, I'm very influential in my company, I'm very successful, and the reason why I'm successful is because I'm very fiscally responsible. I'm like, that's wonderful, John. And he said, so if you're telling me that I get a candidate who's a woman who's making 130 and a man who's making 150, that I should offer them both 160 because it's fair? Botox face. He goes, well, but that wouldn't be doing the right thing for my company. I'm like, wow, that is so logical. What are you going to tell your daughter when she comes home and tells you that story? And he said, oh, it'll be fixed by then. You're laughing, but you've seen somebody do this, right? Second story, startup guy in Texas. I'm going through the same thing with him. And he goes, well, yeah, like as if I could do that. I'm like, why not? And he goes, well, I'm like, what? He goes, I'd get sued. I'm like, you're gonna get sued because you're gonna give a bunch of people in your company a raise? Like, he gave me a raise, that's it, I'm finding a lawyer. And he goes, no, it's not it. It would be admitting that I'm wrong. I'm like, you are wrong. If you can admit it to me, admit it to them. Maybe it might make you a happier guy. So I'm very passionate about this because I have 26-year-old twin daughters. I don't want them to do this again. We got to stop doing this.
My 2 daughters are fixed for career. They're going to be hurlers. They're going to be the first international hurlers in Ireland. Thank you, David. The second panel discussion we looked at, so we spoke about employer branding.
Yeah.
Yes, we have great insights from really, really exciting companies, and then Monster doing really kind of exciting stuff around Europe and around the States. What's your, say, top 3 tips for everyone in the audience to build a real meaningful employer brand?
Happy, delighted, enthusiastic customers who will recommend you to somebody else first and foremost. It's your product. Right, so it's not your video that's attached to your website of your employees playing foosball, or I went to I'm so bad. I went to a really cute startup in Southern California, and I'm like, razor scooters on your website, like that's kind of so yesterday. Bartenders like razor scooters, like Nerf guns. Whoa, old school. Have a great product, first of all, that everybody talks about anyway, because the best employer brands are associated with great products, right? Oh, wow, you work at Microsoft, I use that. Wow, Salesforce, what a great company that is, right? What inroads they've made. And the second is, if you're going to be declarative about who you are as a company and what you stand for, then do that. Make sure that your actions match it. I met Blake Mykoski, who's the CEO of Tom's, and we were talking about employee engagement stuff, and I said to him, so what do you do? Like, what's your perks at Tom's? And he goes, oh, Patty, I am the biggest tightwad on the planet. He goes, seriously, I don't buy them water. I'm like, wow, the guy on the other side, he buys 7 kinds of water. Like, he's got, still and sparkling in 4 flavors. And he said, no, I only do one thing. I make sure that each of my employees in their first 2 years of employment goes to a third world country and puts shoes on the feet of a child. It's like, done. So the thing about employer branding is it says unique as your company. And so, which leads me to my rant about best practices. It's a thing that we say that has literally no meaning. Right? Best practices is either A, what everybody else does, or B, what the cool company du jour does, right? when we did the no time off policy, this is another fun story. Every startup was doing it, right? So then a friend of mine who's doing HR at this startup in San Francisco calls me up. She goes, hey, listen. Oh, she sends to I have a group, I have a HR posse of people that we send each other emails to. Posse, has anybody tried to do a bonus plan to get people to take vacation? Because nobody's actually taking vacation. I was thinking, are you doing cash bonuses or equity? I'm like, will you go call your grandmother and say that? Maybe you need to give them really tight vacation policies so that then they can be free of it, right? And then I met her with her CEO and I said, do you ever take vacation? He goes, oh God, no. He goes, yeah, I'm taking one, but I'm not telling anybody. I'm like, could you please bring back pictures? Because if you never take vacation, it doesn't matter what you write down, it matters what you do.
I think it's echoed your sense of best practice. It just reminded me of Brian's discussion about excellence.
Yeah.
But there's no end. So future practice, continuous improvement,
That's right.
always moving and developing and
That's
developing
right.
and developing.
Yeah.
Chapter in your book. The next panel we had, so we had John, staffing industry analyst, talking about the future world of work. So
Yeah.
different generations that work in different ways of working and insourcing, outsourcing, robotics and so on,
Yeah.
which I thought was quite good. And David from Recruitment International mentioned, and he said, he mentioned the survey, the first question from the survey about millennials said that the millennials hate being called millennials. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the generational divide, how do you see that moving and developing, and what can we do, or should we do anything at all?
You know, we'll give up this millennial crap when they turn 30. So, right, and then we'll have to think of some, they're the X's or Y's or Z's, or I hate the millennial. You were a millennial, I was a millennial, we're not anymore. Or maybe you are, but one of these days you won't be. It's called being young in the workforce, right? And, the same stereotypes happen the other way around with the boomers or whatever label we call each other. Instead of trying to understand the difference between people who grew up with a computer in their hand versus those of us who didn't see it until we were at work, that's a pretty important thing to think about, but we're all just people. Right, so if we think of each other as in some spectrum of our careers, and we start thinking about the teams that we build and how people come together to create great products or services for our customers, then we're going to be really glad we have lots of different kinds of people. Right? Like at Netflix, I told the story yesterday, I was always the one that represented the normal shopping person, because everybody on this particular team was a bunch of engineers and they would A/B test everything to death. I'm like, you don't have to A/B test that. I'll tell you what a normal person would do. Because you guys, what do you mean? Don't you think they want to monitor on their screen that shows their internet bandwidth capacity as it's going? I'm like, no, the internet's magic. That's how we think of it, those of us who are normal. Okay, no, we don't need to know CPU capacity. We don't really need to know that. So, I think that the more that people that have wisdom and have experience believe it's part of their job to make sure they pass that along, and then learn and be curious about things that they don't know. Those are great behaviors to have in organizations, and will make us better organizations, and will make us reflective of the world we live in. I coach a CEO at this wonderful company in India. It's called Hike Messenger. And it's like Snapchat, but they use emojis, and the emojis are all very Indian. She has her veil on, she has her veil off. It's just so cute. But their biggest, the last time I talked to him, I said, wow, I heard you guys grew 300% last quarter. Rock on. And your biggest growth segment was 18 to 24-year-old women. He goes, yeah, I know, it's really exciting, isn't it? We're doing a lot of testing. I'm like, how about if you test by having having young women on your team? You have any women on the engineering team? He's like, no, Patty, I haven't thought of that. And I'm like, trust me, you don't know what an 18-year-old woman wants. Ever. Very interesting. I must work on that leadership skill.
Talking about female business leaders. So,
Female business leaders?
so the next stream then, so just to segue into the following stream, so there's one on leadership and values-based leadership. And Michael from Trinity mentioned about that impact on community, but walking the walk.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's your sense of the impact, say, with the HR leaders in the room, and the business leaders in the room? What can we do tomorrow to build capacity to create more jobs, which is what this week is about?
Well, you started the question with female leadership, and honestly, I think all of us just, if the more we can come to the middle, the better we are. Again, it's more about understanding what we have in common. Mm-hmm. Let me start with a context thing.
Sure.
You know, when you're talking to somebody and you look at them and the bubble over their head is like, they have no clue. This person is totally clueless. Close your eyes, count to 10, look at them again and say, this person doesn't have a clue. They don't know. They don't know what I know, right? So then it's your job then to, instead of, be smug and walk away and go, there's another person that doesn't know what they're talking about, to instead invest the time and say, do you understand help me understand where you're coming from, right? So the more we're curious about each other, the more we know. And that's a male and female thing. Mm-hmm. I tend to think that women are better at it sometimes than men, unless they're challenging a position of authority and then they don't do anything, but that's another whole conversation. And I think that successful companies create jobs, right? So, and if if you put together everything I've said, which is you want your companies to reflect the goodness of your product or service, and in order to do that, your product or your company should reflect the people that you serve, which will help and that will help create more jobs. Right? You're going to want, I believe in capitalism. I believe in that it's not a trickle-down theory, it's a trickle-out theory.
Sure.
And the more successful we all are, the more people we need to help our businesses grow.
Adriana Huffington.
Adriana, oh, you want me to
told
do my
us a good
Adriana
story there.
impression? So I'm on this group. I have no clue how I got invited. Honestly, I don't. But it's a Virgin Unite. Virgin Unite is the philanthropic arm of Virgin. And Richard Branson and Arianna Huffington got together, and they have this group of people that meet twice a year to talk about 100% human at work. And they always develop, whenever we get together, there's a really glossy brochure attached. They're really good at graphics. So look for it, and maybe, they'll send you one, and you'll think, wow, I'm really cool because I got this glossy magazine. So Ariana's big thing is about rest and relaxation. She's a big fan of napping pods at work, and that people, because she was a workaholic, and then she collapsed because of overwork, so now she's on this big mission to change that. So Ariana's doing this talk. I'm doing my Ariana. She goes, at the HuffPost, we have a policy. Do not work on the weekend. It's time to rest and relax. Recharge yourself. So Sunday, I was shooting off some emails. And do you know that people in the HuffPost responded in 5 minutes? What's with that? I mean, I know I sound like the Saturday Night Live impression, but she is exactly like that. She sounds exactly like that. So she gets done with her speech and she walks away, and I didn't get a chance to talk to her, so I sent her an email, and the subject line is tough love. Dear Ariana, you are Ariana Huffington. One, you are Ariana Huffington, and I'm thinking that pretty much anybody on the planet who gets an email from you on Sunday is going to reply, call me crazy, right? Two, why do you have a policy about when people can send emails? Don't you have adults working for you? Can't they figure out when to send email? And three, it's not what you say, it's what you do. And you and I have had this conversation a number of times. Boom, reply. It's Sunday, by the way. Patty, darling. I have to respond, reading it in my accent. You're so funny and adorable. You're crazy, too. Here at the HuffPost, our policies are merely suggestions. Yes.
Very good, very good. I won't ask you about the Irish accent. I threatened it. But
I can't do my, this is as far as I've gone on my Irish accent.
Good enough, good enough, good enough, good enough.
You know, your last name, it's McDougall, I don't. I am now, though, I do have a new hero. Shit, I gotta remember it. Grace O'Malley? What do you call her?
Yeah.
Yeah, the Pirate Queen? Hell yeah. She's my girl. What's the Irish name I'm supposed to call her? Granuaile. Granuaile? Yeah, baby. She says to the English queen, I ain't bowing, I'm a queen too. Okay, I'll rob Spanish. Fine, you guys are cool.
She's in the book, she's in the book.
She's in the book.
You've been accredited with Reinventing HR.
Yeah.
What do you think the most impactful changes that you influenced or brought about or did in Netflix, for example? And what's next?
I looked at every single thing we did in traditional HR and asked myself, why? Why do we do the annual performance review? What's the point? The point is to give people feedback. Okay. If I was an inventor and I was like all the inventors that I worked with, I was surrounded with at Netflix, and I said, okay, you know what I want to do? I want to create a system that gives people feedback on their performance because I believe that it might make for better performance. Agree? Would you come up with the annual performance review? I mean, it's a terrible system to give feedback, right? Have I already said my thing about Scotty?
No.
I was on stage in Montreal with the former head coach of the National Hockey League in Montreal in the hockey stadium. I mean, this guy came up on stage and people were weeping. Right? Oh my God, Scotty Bowman! They're like taking selfies. I walk up on stage, they're like, says, how do you give feedback to people on your team, Scotty? He goes, you know, we have an 80-game season. Every 10 games we get together. We put together the stats on that player. I get feedback from the other coaches. I write down some feedback. The player comes in. They have feedback on themselves. We have a discussion. We figure out what we're going to do for the next 10 games. So then the moderator says to me, hey, Patty, how do you feel about feedback? I'm like, what he said. So that, you know, that's, if you look at everything we do with an innovator and inventor's mindset, then two things are going to happen. One of them is you're going to have clarity on what the results are that you want to achieve by whatever it is you're doing, just like everybody else in the business does, by the way. And you'll also realize that some of the most innovative work you can do in HR is to stop doing stuff that doesn't matter.
Like what?
The annual performance review, like the 7 levels of approval, like the going to somebody in an accounts payable clerk in finance to approve $5,000 that she has no clue what it's going to be spent on. Like the, but then let's take that one. Let's take expenses. So when I got rid of expense approvals and expense limits, I had to talk my CFO into turning the people in finance, who were the people that were approving expense reports, to people who were reporting back to the organization on a pretty regular basis. So managers all got reports of all the expenditures of everybody in their department monthly. And then we encouraged them to say, wow, you went out with a couple of colleagues on Friday and you guys spent $700 for dinner and for the 4 of you. What's up, right? Oh, you know, Robert likes that $200 bottle of wine. We drank 4 bottles, I don't know. It's like, what were you doing there? Oh, we were having a work meeting. Really? That's why God made the conference rooms over here, right? And I did this with my head of recruitment. She's like, are you going to fire me? I'm like, no, you guys just use good judgment next time. I don't care if you buy a candidate $200 bottle of wine, but that's why I pay him a fortune. That's why he drinks $200 wine. But those would drive the conversations around, was money wisely spent, which is the real conversation you want to have. And you would be surprised what you uncover. You know, I said I'm walking through the engineering part of the building right when we were starting to, like your remote control, we were streaming to TV sets. And this one part of the building, every single engineer had two 50-inch flat screen TVs in their cubicles. I'm like, holy shit, look, this is a lot of money. Somebody else goes, yeah, you know, we buy them at Best Buy. So I find that, and I'm like, how much money are you spending on TVs, and how come you're buying them at Best Buy, and can't Sony send them to us directly? I mean, I'm thinking we have relationships with these suppliers. And he goes, yeah, they can, but that's not where our customers get them, Patty. Our customers get them at Best Buy. This is the test organization. And you should be aware that we need to talk about facilities because their next version is 70-inch. Which makes complete sense. You know, was it a fortune in television? Yes. Would that have gotten approved? No way. Right? And then we had the real conversation, which is, yeah, you know, actually I'm spending a lot of money on TVs. And since you give me a holistic budget, I'm a little worried about my head count. Because, you know, I am at the point where the 70-inch flat screen TVs might add up to another engineer, and we need to talk. And then we did. Right? Then we would come back and say, looks like a bump in costs in this department. How are we going to move that across teams? Instead of, you know, how am I going to go beg Reed to give me more money? He might say, I did some horse trading with Leslie in marketing. So that's a different...
Yeah, makes sense. Guys, I'll come to you for questions in a second. But before I do, Patty, could you give us your top 3 takeaways or tips, given the theme of building a culture with purpose?
Yeah.
To everyone in the room, please.
Clarity about your purpose is number 1. And it's whatever you write down, whatever it is you agree upon, be careful about the words and make sure everybody can say them the same. You know, I used to say, okay, we should count on one hand the things that are important to us this year. And I should be able to go to anybody in the company and say, what 5 things are important for us to accomplish this year? And I better get at least 4, right? So that people can come in the morning. I used to say, you know, what you want to say to yourself every day is, what do I do today that moves us farthest, fastest? And when you go, okay, well, this thing that I want to do that's kind of fun isn't on that list. You know, maybe I can lobby for it next year. So one is clarity of your purpose. The second one is, and the team here before me talked a little bit about it, and I loved that everybody talked about celebrating milestones. I mean, and celebrating little wins and celebrating big wins. You know, don't let those things go by without marking them. And I guess the third thing is to spend the time. The team before us talked a little bit about reflection, but I want to talk about it a little differently. Use your mistakes to make you stronger. You know, so for every time someone stands up on stage and celebrates a big win, try and find somebody who will stand on stage and say, you know, I was wrong. You know, I made that decision and I powered through it and it turned out to be a bad idea. And here's the information that I had at the time, and here's why I made the decision, and here's what I've learned to be true since I made that decision. And the more your leaders can model, you know, reflection and correction, then I think that gives people a sense of purpose, especially if that leader says, I drove this decision hard because I thought we were attacking this problem, and I was wrong. So I'm going to need your help in helping me think, because we still got to attack that problem. Or, hey, by the way, the 5 things we thought were important, one of them turned out not to be. Right? The other thing we do as leaders is we commit to direction, and then we're like, well, got to do that come hell or high water, even if it turns out to be wrong. So allow yourself to correct mid-cycle, I think.
Brilliant. Paddy, can I just conclude, just spending 3 days with you has been phenomenal.
It's been fun.
It's been great fun. And so many lessons and so many takeaways. And just my experience of you, there's just 3 key takeaways, and they're changing every day. So I summarize like a Jerry Springer moment summarizing the session takeaways.
You're going to have 9 key takeaways when we're done, because you have 3 every day.
I've distilled them, I'm trying to keep it simple.
Okay.
So I've 3, right? So
Okay.
1, treat people like people.
Yep.
It's a reoccurring theme in everything you're saying. 2 is use good judgment.
Yes.
I know you worked with HubSpot, it was well articulated in their document. When you make a decision, how does it impact 1, your customer, 2, the company, 3, you,
Yep.
and that hierarchy of decision making and using judgment, I thought was quite powerful. And then a good dose of common sense.
Yeah. My mama calls it horse sense.
Horse sense.
Yeah, you just got to have horse sense. She's from Texas, so she says things like that.
Very good. Well, look, it's been a pleasure to spend time with you. We're so happy to have you here. We would love you to come back to Ireland sometime. If not, we'll read about it in the book. But thanks so much for joining us.
Thank
It's been a
you.
pleasure.
I love Ireland. Thank you.